Good. But welcome everyone again. Happy Monday. My name's Laura Manley. I'm the administrative specialist here at EPN, and we're where the church gathers. We're happy to have you all here today talking about our parish facilities and that demystification and ensuring we're doing our code compliance correctly. And we're so thankful for our partners here who are sharing with us, who I'll introduce in just a moment. This is our last workshop before the Labor Day holiday. Can you believe it? So we hope you all have a great holiday and that you'll take advantage of all of our workshops after the Labor Day weekend is over at the beginning of September. And our biggest event, the annual conference, is going to be happening in March 3rd through the 6th in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we hope to see you all there in person. So just a couple quick, housekeeping details before we get started. First, the session is being recorded. You'll all receive an email with a link to the recording and a copy of the slide deck, along with a transcript and some other little details, in about 48 hours. So just keep an eye out for that. And also, we have disabled the Q&A function for all of our workshops. So please, if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the chat. The chat will actually be one of the things available to you. So you can go back and see the questions that were asked if you have, or if you want to see a comment or who you might want to reach out to later and say, hey, I have that same problem. Can we talk about it? You'll have access to that. So again, thank you all for being here. We pray you have a safe and restful holiday. And now I'm happy to introduce Nathan Parr. He's the Facility Stewardship Specialist. Ooh, two specialists today at Smart Church Solutions. And he's going to guide us through ensuring that our parishes are places of safety and accessibility for everyone. So Nathan, thank you and welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, for having us and allowing Smart Church Solutions to be part of this. And I am very excited to see you all. I will go ahead and share my screen so you can at least look at that and maybe have more fun looking at that than me. Let me pull the screen sharing this stuff out of there. Technology is just grand, isn't it? So glad to have you here. Glad to see you. My name is, as mentioned, Nathan Parr. I'm a facility stewardship specialist with Smart Church Solutions. Big fancy title for I love facilities and I love helping organizations understand what their facility is, what condition it is in, and how to better maintain it and be a more effective and efficient facility steward. We firmly believe at Smart Church Solutions that, hey, you don't need a building uh, to be a church, because the church is not the building. The church is the people. But if you have a facility that's been entrusted to you, it's been entrusted to you by the Lord, and we are asked, told, and honored to maintain it. That should be our attitude. That's kind of where we come from, and from this. So, as mentioned before, if you have chats, questions, I'm kind of looking at the chat as we go. You'll see me kind of pop back and forth. I'm love. You can interrupt me anytime. I love it. This is going to be on kind of the fun topics, at least fun for me. I enjoy them, but it's on the facility first in general. Some just basic things I want to make sure you're tracking, and then we're going to talk some about the code compliance stuff. We're not going to go so deep that this is like reminiscent of a OSHA 10-hour course or something like that. But all of these things that we talk about, and I've got some pictures that I'll show you, some examples, are things that I've found and observed and documented over the last 8 years that I've been with the company. And in that 8 years, I've evaluated over 8 million square feet of churches and sacred space in 27 different states. And our current tracking is between deferred or delayed maintenance and future projects. Most organizations, and this is a fun fact you might just want to write down. Most organizations are in the neighborhood between $25 and $35 per square foot behind, or lacking that amount of reserve or funding available to maintain their facility. And a lot of that stems from the first couple things I'm going to talk about, and then it impacts your ability to be in compliance and to focus on those secondary things like ADA, accessibility, OSHA, life safety. And so that's where we're going to go. And again, there's my information and email. Happy to talk with you if you have any other questions uh, going forward. There we go. So first thing is when we're talking about these systems, these um, life safety, ADA, things like that, our facilities, we got to take a step back, in my opinion, to understand that the first and foremost is curiosity is as vital as expertise. Many times in many organizations, I imagine if I asked everyone that's on this webinar right now, how many of you have paid facility staff or paid custodial staff, it's not going to be everyone. Not everyone's going to do that. You have a lot of volunteers. A lot of parishes I know operate almost exclusively volunteers, and many don't have the correct level of staffing if you've got paid staff for custodial and maintenance operations. And all of those things, of course, impact your ability to function and the longevity of fit finishes and all those things in your facility. Um, if you want to know, back of envelope calculations, uh, for every 35,000 square feet, it requires a full-time equivalent to maintain. One for maintenance and one for custodial. That's a basic number you can use for calculating. And a lot of this information is free for you to download from our website. If you ever want to get it, just go to smartchurchsolutions.com and resources, and feel free take all of those resources. We've done studies and things like that to help provide that for you. But when we come to expertise will tell us, how to manage those facilities, how to take care of those. But curiosity is really required, because that's the what and the why. And that's where we learn things, and that's where we can make better stewardship decisions that will again impact our compliance and things like that. And if you're not asking those questions, if you're not having some curiosity about that, um, you're just simply maintaining, and you're basically fixing what flares up first. And if you talk to any firefighter or anybody who's been around large scale fires, which we've had a lot in this country over the last few years, just battling the pop-up spots or where the fire is raging can put you at risk for the smoldering areas that you have not addressed yet. And so that makes it hard to actually steward, because we're not paying attention to stuff until it breaks or until it fails or until it flares up. And we don't want to be like that. And stewardship, so then it requires, in addition to this knowledge, it requires this wonder, observation, and a refusal for, I don't know. And having worked with parishes and churches and independents and private schools and this, that, and the other, from a facility stewardship perspective, I can tell you, I don't know, unfortunately, is a significant response to many things that I believe you should know if you want to be responsible and an effective facility steward. Um, and so, what do we ask? If I'm telling you this is very important. How can I equip you to start doing this in your home parish? And that's my goal today. Is basic questions. A lot of times we'll say, um, or we'll talk about the big three in facility stewardship. And again, these things will impact your available funding to then maintain and take care of all the other building systems. They have a very big impact on your budget. And the big three are roofing, HVAC, and parking. And if you add the big three plus one is flooring. Flooring, you can kind of get away with a little bit, but those big three, the reason we call them the big three is they tend to be the most expensive part of your facility. They tend to last the longest, but they also tend to be the most expensive to repair or replace. I imagine this being the Episcopal Parish Network, many of the parishes that are represented here will have things like slate roofs, real slate roofs, and older buildings and masonry construction and things like this. And Um, and they'll have um, HVAC systems and boiler systems that some of them are older, harder to maintain, things like that. Um, but and if we're not really cognizant of what we have, how it works, where it's done, how to get it in and out, when it breaks, it can become a significant issue for us to address. Uh, so here's some questions I would ask you. Do you know the answer to these? And these are basics. Uh, What's it covered with on your roof? What type of covering do you have? Do you have slate shingles? Do you have synthetic slate? Do you have an EPDM? Do you have a TPO? Do you have an architectural shingle? Do you have a built up? Do you have, the list goes on. How many squares? And a square is 100 square feet in roofing terms. So that's what all bids are typically calculated on, or should be, because it's on a square of roofing. And how old is your roof? Um, Roofs have an expected lifetime. You know, you go to a concrete tile, it's about 100 years. You go to slate, 100 to 150 years if it's well maintained. You go to an EPDM or a TPO, 15 to 20 years. Some will go up to 25, depending on how it's installed. If it's installed correctly to warrant the longer warranty. Asphalt shingles, usually 20 to 25, single tab shingles 10 to 15, so on and so forth. So understanding those questions helps you better plan, better budget, and have a better idea of what it's going to cost you to maintain and replace so that you can start setting money aside correctly into a capital reserve account so that you're not taken by surprise. And then you have free funds. That's probably the wrong term. That never happens in church, right? There's no such thing as free funds, but you have available funding to then address some of the um, compliance options. Yes, but very much. Not everyone knows all the acronyms. I threw out a bunch of acronyms. Uh, the TPO and EPDM, that's what you typically see, like a single ply on a flat to low slope roof. The shingles, your typical flat, if they're very flat, kind of a three tab. If it's got dimensional look to it, it's an architectural type shingle on houses that you would see. Concrete tiles have many different shape, but it's in essence chunks of concrete on your roof. And then the slate, obviously natural slate versus synthetic, things like that. Um, and that's a very good point, and it falls right into that. If many times you may ask a professional the question and they'll throw the acronyms. I'm used to them. I throw them out. I know what they mean, but if you don't, ask questions. Never be ashamed. If you ask me a question or if you ask any other professional construction person a question, they should be able to explain it to you in terms that you can understand. That's the mark of a professional, is that they can explain it to a layperson, if you will. From the HVAC stuff, and HVAC, that's your air conditioner, it's your heating, ventilation, and cooling. What type of systems do you have? What's their capacity and their age? If we have time, we can look at some pictures of the data plate that, for example, if you go to your house, your home unit, you'll see the exterior unit, the condenser. If you read the data plate on there between the model and serial number, it's going to tell you the capacity. It's going to tell you what type of unit it is. And on the serial number, it's going to tell you the age of the unit. And we know systems have a certain lifespan. 15 years a lot of times is kind of the average for commercial equipment for anything that's less than 10 tons. When you get to bigger than 10 tons, and that's the amount of cooling it does, those numbers start to change. Maybe it's 15, maybe it's 18, maybe it's 20. Certain things like cooling towers and stuff like that, and boilers, chillers, they last a little differently. But as you can tell, knowing what that means um, is very helpful to then make the right choices. Um, and so from the site, and I'm going to get back to your question, James. Where are all your mechanical systems, right? You can't maintain them. You can't make sure that it's safe from an OSHA perspective. You can't make sure that you're maintaining the safe distances unless you know where they are and where your property lines are. Because property lines, from a safety and security standpoint, knowing where that is very important, and then how it interacts with the rest of your facility. And these questions are not, trivia questions, or they're not meant as gotcha or anything. They're stewardship anchors. These are the things that that are fundamental if you have a facility that you need to know. And if you don't know them, you can't plan properly. You're basically planning blind. That means you're going to, unfortunately, push into improper planning, right? You're going to try to plan to solve an issue that's not the primary issue or a critical issue in the long term. Um, James' question: Do we get involved with compliance with new energy consumption regulations, the the reporting requirement and stuff? Um, Not specifically those systems. We do advise when applicable, especially if we're on site for a facility condition assessment. One of the things we offer as we're there on site is, okay, one thing we get to do is we get to research and see lots of different ways people are getting to a greener, cleaner environment. And we can make recommendations. And I love making recommendations because a lot of times, I'm not the one footing the bill. I just get to say, this would be really cool and it would help you save if X. Um, the With our software that we have, we can train people to actually start using that to track the stuff if you don't have a specific software that you are required to report to, but at least to maintain and track your records, because that's also part of compliance and record keeping, just good record keeping in general. How often are you having to fix these units? Are you having a recurring issue at a unit? Uh, if you have humidity issues, how are you tracking the humidity issues? Is it time to put a direct or a specific dehumidification unit into your sanctuary to dehumidify the space to keep the organ chamber so you're not having to have it tuned every other week, which would be crazy. Um, um, so, and those are things that come with this compliance with stewardship and with knowing these things about your building. Because if I discover I need to dehumidify an organ chamber or the organ space or the sanctuary, the unit that serves that space when it comes due, then I'm going to work with my contractor to say I need to be able to maintain a humidity level between X and Y. And then they can design a system, because it's going to take a system likely not originally thought of. And it's like some of my churches in Houston, Texas. If you're familiar with Houston, Texas, it's like below sea level. It rains all the time. Humidity is a big deal. We've made recommendations and encouraged folks to install dehumidification systems that are used in indoor swimming pools or natatoriums to help reduce the felt moisture in the air. And those are just dedicated. All they do is tie into the ducts and make it a lot less moist in the building, because again, humidity's not real good on a lot of finishes. And I'm sorry, uh, Gene. Yes, if you don't write it down, if you don't have a software, if you don't have a tracking system, when you discover all these things, if you don't actually take action, especially from a compliance and inspection, which we're going to talk about really more in depth with OSHA and ADA, how, how do you know? How are you tracking it? You're not being a good steward, right? You're not actually taking care of what you're supposed to, if that makes sense. Um, and so, and Donna has too little humidity. Okay. Too little. I've not run into that, Donna. With too little humidity and anything, you must be in a much drier clime than everybody. The So when we talk about the building envelope and the examples and that we're going, um, these are just a couple things to be aware of and look at. And these are common things. And 99% of all these pictures come from parishes that I've evaluated, Episcopal parishes that I've evaluated. Um, and these all things add into moisture intrusion, add into interior damage, can infect your interior systems, which it impacts your environmental quality, your interior environmental quality. And those are issues. So I'm trying, I don't know if I can point where I use my pointer, but you see gaps in the lintel and the rust forming there. You see gaps in the caulking. Again, these are all moisture intrusion areas. Moisture gets in the building, you can't get it out. Again, caulking. Roof issues where you see it start to rust and the paneling connecting up to there. and a lot of caulking in a guttering system that when that starts failing, all that water comes into the building. And now we have, again, environmental uh, air quality issues in the building, just damaged wood structure, things that need to be repaired, holes in the mortar. Now we can get insects and other critters coming into the building. Um, Damaged masonry. Again, you can see the shifting that's occurring. If we're not dealing with these and finding them soon, they become much more expensive to repair. The more that we have to spend to repair them, or they become an emergency repair. Now, for every dollar that we don't spend when we notice it or find it initially, it costs us $3 to $4 more to repair it. And that's the issue again when we talk about these things. If we're not dealing with it, it's coming to this condition. Now it's a much bigger issue to deal with and repair on some of these cracks, some of these holes, missing mortar, things like that. Damaged or crooked lights. And some of this also impacts just our impressions for our first time guests. Um, but you see these things. None of these things that I'm showing you occurred within a week. Most of this occurs over many years. And if you're not fixing it, if you're not taking and maintaining care of your facility, and then this one here, I included this one in the billing envelope one. This is part of a pathway that the public is encouraged to go and enjoy this beautiful prayer garden and walk. Well, if you notice, that's very unstable, and that you're inviting the public. You have a duty to provide a safe pathway. That's not currently safe. Again, holes in the caulking gap, bugs eating the stuff as they carpenter ants in that particular example. Once they kind of get through the soft there, if they get into your building, what kind of damage would that do to some of your interior finishes, especially if you've got a leaky building envelope? If we're not maintaining our landscaping, we see these bushes, trees, and everything growing into stuff, which then causes issues down the road. This is part of a retaining wall where the entire corner at the basement, going to the basement, has starting to separate. So it's a safety rail tied into there that's broken. The edge, that crack goes all the way down. Again, damaged coatings, debris growing on a roof, chipped and rusting paint near a children's entrance and exit. Children always like to eat and do stuff like that. Again, mildew, organic debris buildup, rusted out lintels, the thing that's carrying the load of the masonry above it, damaged woodworking there, enough, standing water that algae grows, uninsulated HVAC, which causing that unit to work more, which means you're going to spend more money, spend more energy. We talk about, and I know there's a creation care initiative in the Episcopal world and bringing down that green stuff. Well, stuff like this is also things that need to be addressed, because if I were to simply insulate this ductwork for this rooftop unit before it goes in, I'm going to start saving more energy. The unit's not going to have to work as hard. And I'm not trying to cool the air partly and go from there. Or, major structural issues. This has been going on for a while. If this were to fall off with somebody under it, what do you think will happen? That's not good. And then same thing, just stuff growing, stuff left, and then damaged windows. And I believe that's all of that one. So that's kind of the building envelope, but that's part of that big three I was talking about. And again, if we allow those to continue to deteriorate past the normal expected deterioration and renovation cycle, what's going to happen is, again, we're spending 4 times as much, up to 4 times as much to repair it, which means we don't have the funds available to remain in compliance. Any questions about the building envelope stuff up to this point? We've caught pretty much everything that we've got there. And we'll have time for the random questions at the end of the thing. But okay, if y'all got that, then the next part, the first part, is regulations and faithful stewardship. First and foremost, if you have more than one paid employee that works with at your church or your parish, excuse me, non-clergy, if you will, or if they're performing non-clerical clergy work, you fall under OSHA. That's part of the rules. There's the act, the 1975. It's the William Steigers Act of 1975. Um, we're not exempt as faith-based organizations. Compliance also, uh, it's not onerous. What I like to tell people when I teach on kind of the OSHA and the life safety stuff is, look, OSHA, it's designed and rule most, not all, but most of the compliance issues that OSHA and we as organizations should be following are designed to keep somebody from dying. They're designed specifically that says, we know in the past when this condition existed, somebody got hurt or killed. Don't do it. And so as a church, as a gathering of believers, as stewards, I don't think we should turn away from that call, right? It's okay. Um, and so and being compliant with that comes some credibility, that comes some transparency and trust. It also comes with if you can show that you are working to maintain compliance with kind of these OSHA and life safety rules, if you show that you are inspecting these things and fixing these things and can prove it through paperwork, through reporting, things like that, your insurance company likes it. We work with several large insurance companies and even some pilot programs going, okay, how much can the safety of this church improve if they follow these rules after they've been assessed and they take care of these things, and they're going to check them a year later and see because even the insurance companies are starting to take note of that. And again, we're not exempt. Now, the odds, to be perfectly frank, um, the odds of an OSHA inspection or investigation occurring on your campus are extremely low. This is not an industry, even though we do have our own code and the OSHA stuff, the NAICS code and things like that. Um, they're typically not going to come in unless an employee loses a sight, loses a limb, or loses their life in the performance of their duties while on your property. I pray that this never happens to any of you. But just because it doesn't typically happen or is highly unlikely to happen doesn't mean it can't. And ultimately, being as safe as you can be and doing all the operations is the right thing to do. Um, sorry, uh, got up and the direct OSHA question. And so OSHA, this is funny. So employees and stuff, there is no full-time equivalency. It's paid staff. Really, when you kind of read the law, it's pretty much, hey, if you got paid staff that's not doing performance of clergy work, you fall under it. And clergy, when they are doing anything that is part of um, church work, if you will, if they are providing a sermon, if they are working as clergy, doing that, technically at that point, while the performance of religious duties, you don't have to follow OSHA. I would recommend they do in term, don't as a sermon illustration stand on top of a ladder juggling chainsaws while a frayed cord is in a kiddie pool. That I would kind of like to see that, but that's, technically if they got hurt doing that, then OSHA wouldn't be involved because that's in the performance of their clerical duties or clergy duties, clerical, any religious duties. We'll just say it that way. But anyone else, or if they are doing office work in the building, or if your clergy is working and cleaning the building, they're under OSHA at that point. Does that make sense? And I hope that answers that question. Um, so while there is an exemption for the performance of religious duties, the reality is that's kind of a small percentage on many times on a lot of our priests and things like that. So if you got employees, just know that you're probably under OSHA. And even if you don't have employees, if everything's volunteer, OSHA rules, for the most part, are designed to keep people safe, to keep you from dying. And so that's what we want to do. And it's a mindset. It's a mindset that says, I'm not going to accept complacency for the ease that it provides. I'm not going to worry about securing a cord. I'm not going to worry about checking my stuff because it just takes a little time. I'm not going to forego that and become complacent just to stop that. Ministerial duties. Okay. In the performance of ministerial duties, specific ministerial duties. Thank you for that. That's when the clergy are exempt. And again, these aren't burdens. These are guardrails that protect people property and the mission. So common OSHA stuff. I'm not going to go through everything, but we always find the following pretty much. And these are all fall under certain things, and some are murky where they fall. Some of it falls under OSHA, some of it falls under local regulatory compliance, some of it falls under NFPA, and it's referenced by other things. You don't need to know all of that unless you want to. I'm happy to chat later if you want to go deeper. But things that we find. This picture was taken in 2024. That's an AED pad. So it's a life safety device that has an expired pad. Will the pad work? Probably. But if it doesn't, you're in trouble. Your insurance is not going to cover any lawsuit that might arise if you use an expired first aid device on somebody. Um, Improperly labeled secondary chemical container. This is a big one. A lot of stuff cleaning. Everybody loves to clean, but that's an improperly labeled to a child or to someone who doesn't understand. That also looks like blue Gatorade, one of the most popular flavors. From OSHA, and this is an ADA picture. Sorry, but you'll see that the pull there on that handle um, is over 5 pounds. On an accessible door, you cannot have the hold open force past the initial opening exceed 5 pounds. So that's an adjustment on an opener, but those are things that we're looking for. Those are compliance issues. You've got an accessible tag on the door, but this door, I can negate or say that these accessible restrooms are not accessible 90% of the time just by the opening of the door because it exceeds that 5 pounds. Um, Emergency exit lights that don't function when tested. Obviously, if I push that test button, those lights should be glowing. The testing frequency on emergency exit lights and signs is 30 seconds once a month for 11 months, 90 minutes, one time a year. That's the testing ratio. Many of you have soft goods, curtains, things. You go to the local store, get some curtains, hang it up on there. Apologize, picture's a little fuzzy, but that is not marked with fire retardant, with a fire retardant chemical, or marked as being fire resistant. Any soft goods that are in your facility, hung, staging, curtains, things like that, if you buy it from a theatrical supply house, it's going more than likely come or have been manufactured in a process that has a fire retardancy built into the product. You can also buy the product to treat soft goods. You just have to reapply it every 5 to 10 years, depending on the product that you use, which again, this is now safety, this is now compliance. Many of the times when there are fires in facilities, in clubs, and not necessarily in churches, but places that use a lot of drapery, they're using non-fire retardant materials for the drapery and wall hangings, and that just creates a much worse fire. The banners on the altars, it's a great question when it comes to safety. Me personally, I would say as cheap as fire retardant stuff does is, I test a spot to make sure it doesn't damage the colors of the banners and things like that, but especially because there's lit candles and things like that. An investment of a product to treat all of your soft goods would not only help protect it from fire damage, it would keep it from becoming an accelerant or an additive to the conflagration that could potentially happen with a lit candle. So that's the mindset from a compliance and regulatory thing we have to think of. It's a lot of times I will get pushback because people say that's not likely going to happen, or that hasn't happened here before, or that's an extreme example. I understand that. However, part of risk management in the church is thinking of the extreme, trying to plan for it, and recognizing, the plan may not be 100% sufficient, but at least you have an idea of what you are going to attempt to do, and you've thought through it. Um, Again, improperly labeled stuff. This is a big deal. Magic spray. I don't know what magic spray is. Is it a brand name? Is it just what they call it, magic spray? I don't know. But if my kid were to ingest that, or if I were to spray that in my eye, how do I know? I can tell you the majority of parishes I've inspected and churches in general don't have proper SDS, which is safety data sheets, on site or available for all the chemicals that are in use in the building. Under OSHA, you are required to have a safety data sheet for every single chemical in use in your building, easily accessible or at least known where it is by the majority of the people that are employed or responsible for the facility, in addition to a properly executed hazardous communication plan and all sorts of stuff. Um, you see, I've rotated this emergency evacuation plan. NFPA and other life safety things will tell you the emergency evacuation plan should be orientated so that when you look at it at the door, the outline of the building reflects accurately as to how the building is laid out. That means you will have, at a minimum, typically 4 versions of an emergency exit plan so that you can paste it on your doors correctly. Um, Expired food. Do any of you have food storage or storing cans? Again, this was taken in 2024. That was best by August 2023. Another big thing, the portable fire extinguishers. You see, I've got another one in here. You see there's 12 slots on the back. Once a year, you have to have a licensed individual certify those fire extinguishers, and they're the ones that put that little green safety tag, put the little tag on, all the safety stuff. Every month, it is supposed to be inspected by someone properly trained on how to do a portable fire extinguisher inspection to assure that it's still in good working order and available to be used. Once a month, there should be 12 dates and initials that's occurred over the last 12 months. On the safety data sheets, they do not need uh, paper. You can have virtual. The key is they have to be easily accessible in the event of an emergency by anyone that might need to come in contact. So I typically say might as well have a printed out, at least one copy as well. Expired medicines, 2019. This again was taken in 2024. A lot of us have small tiles. That's a big deal there. You see that black dark mastic. If you see a VCT or a vinyl tile that's less than 12 by 12, that is typically the design age and visual representation of something that is highly likely to have asbestos in it. And obviously, we are not to handle asbestos and we're not to disturb it unless we are qualified to do it. It is a carcinogen, and it's a pretty big deal. If you get caught throwing that tile away into your dumpster, not only can you get major fines from the federal government, you can also get fined by your local trash person because the government could say, okay, now you got to go find all those loads and remediate it as well. So you don't want that. Hard to see, but obviously there's green and red for a reason on your freezers and refrigerators. When I walk up to them and I see red, especially on a fridge like that, and that is a refrigerator because the green is above freezing. That means the food items kept in that refrigerator are not being kept at food safe temperature. Um, um, the again, emergency exit lights and sign testing not done. Open electrical junction boxes, not safe. More testing. Um, Pressurized tanks stored inside, that's not ideal at all, especially in an unsecured environment like this where everything is accessible. There's a reason most time when you go to a propane exchange, the propane tanks are outside, and then what do they tell you? Don't bring the propane tanks into the store, leave them outside. Yes, invest in a lockable cage that you can lock these up outside when they're not in use so they don't become a pressurized bomb inside your building. Um, Fire hazard, fire load. Churches typically don't have a storage problem, they have a retainage problem. I will stand by that statement. Most of the stuff in this particular storage closet is not and has not been used in years. There's dust on many of the pieces. It's just there just because or in case. That's not a good reason. This is an access that a church, I love that they have a commercial ladder coming up to this hole, but when it's open, from an OSHA perspective and safety perspective, there's nothing to keep you from accidentally stepping back into the hole. So it needs some sort of safety railing around it as well as some barrier. If you have a lift, many of you, not everybody does, but if you have a lift, there are specific inspections and training requirements for those things. Again, these are not optional, shouldn't be. Or a pressurized container that doesn't have a safety lid screwed down on it, or a safety chain holding. It's at least chained to a dolly, but that dolly was not secured. And so if that were to fall, break up the top, you could have a pressurized missile there. Not a safe way to run your cables and cords. Becomes a trip hazard and a potential fire hazard with some of the lighter gauge um, extension cords I find a lot. Those small brown 2-wire extension cords you see. Um, those are typically not going to handle the load that you're going to put on them. A lot of times I find them overloaded. Um, this one, and let me the propane tank, since that was asked. Locked exterior shed, yeah, great with that. Again, you don't want them stored inside a building where people congregate. Locked outside or in a shed. Um, and it's not an option to be, well, I'm sorry, you're talking ADA. We'll talk about that in just a second. We'll get back to there. Um, let's see. Oh, sorry. Going back to this one. You'll see the bleach, the cleaner and bleach, that Clorox. What you don't know, and I had to do I pulled this because I knew the cleaner, and I don't know if you can see my mouse right there, but this cleaner right here that's above it, and you can see where some of it kind of moves around and it's fallen. The reason I took this picture to show to this individual and this organization is because this is an ammonia-based, or an ammonia-based cleaner. That's a bleach-based cleaner. If you know anything about basic chemistry, those mixed together can potentially form phosgene gas, which is lethal. And so we need to understand on the HAZCOM part of the OSHA, why it's important is so we don't do stuff like that. We don't put cleaners that are potentially hazardous when mixed next to each other, and we also become more aware of what's in our building and should it be in there. And then here, it's a little hard to see, but this red tape and other parts of this room, this was a 2-hour fire rated wall inside a mechanical room. Everything was correct except for they needed an extra outlet, and they just punched a hole in the wall and tied in to this J box to pull power somewhere, but they didn't seal the hole. So now this 2-hour rated room that it's supposed to be 2 hours, so it's a mechanical room. If it catches fire, it's supposed to be able to withstand burning through the walls up to 2 hours. Now that's been violated because there is no fire caulk that was put in around that. And it's like a $5 tube of fire caulk could have kept this room in compliance, and now it's out. Okay. Um, and I'm sorry, am I running short on time? Okay. Um, I'll be quick. um, James had a question. Sorry. If you have knob and tube wiring that haven't removed, would your insurance cover? Maybe. It's worth a question. It's worth an ask. If you can prove that you are actively improving the safety and security of your facility, that can have potentially a positive impact to your premiums and other expenses. Absolutely. That's what stewardship goes hand in hand and affects all of these things in your facility: your accessibility, your safety, potential premiums, visibility, things like that. So, yes, if you're having an issue, if you think it might, absolutely. I mean, talk to them. It doesn't hurt to ask, uh, usually. Um, it- so, because if they don't know you have knob and tube, that might be an issue. But knob and tube you don't want anyway. Okay. If you know you have it, absolutely change it out. Okay, that's a big safety stuff. So now accessibility. So that was kind of, again, very, very, it's even not even the 40,000. That was 100,000 um, foot view, right, of OSHA and things like that. There's a whole lot of stuff we didn't talk about, like ladders and like tools and all sorts of stuff. Happy to, and if you ever invite us out to perform an FCA on your facility, you'll hear and read a lot about it. So what about ADA? So the ADA stuff, um, technically, churches are exempt, usually. The federal government is not going to come in and say you need to be ADA compliant because there's a separation there. If you build new, however, most of the drawings that you will have will be ADA compliant or your local state agency compliant, and you won't be able to get a certificate of occupancy on that new construction generally unless everything meets the state's accessibility requirements. Um, and so that's kind of that gray area. While technically not, from the federal point of view, if you build new, yes, or if you retrofit, they can pull a compliance review to allow you to have a certificate of occupancy if you're making structural changes. And with the law, states can't do less than the federal government requires, but they can do more. So you could have a state ADA or compliance. In Texas, it's Texas accessibility standards. Those can require additional things that the federal ADA laws don't. And if you're in a situation where you need to have a permit approved or certificate of occupancy, uh, you'll have a review and they will tell you what to do. I had that happen to me when I was an operations director. We built a new building. I mean, it was designed to be compliant everywhere, but then we had to add different room signs and we had to add additional horn strobes and things like that for the fire alarm system based on what was TAS told us, and we couldn't get our certificate of occupancy until we did. Um, Getting access to OSHA rules and things like that online, absolutely. A lot of times, your local state department of insurance will also give you and have those things for you and available to you to get. Um, So and when it comes to OSHA and accessibility things like that, if people don't want to do it, when it comes to accessibility, and I'm going to be very blunt, and so I'm just going to say it. While churches don't have to be accessible, and you can, if you're not accessible in any way, shape, and form, you can say, well, we're a church, we don't have to expense that. While technically accurate, if that's your stance, I would encourage you then to also say, also put out a sign that say, all are welcome, except for those of you who have mobility issues, you kind of freak us out. That's how I feel about it. I've worked with special needs community over the years, and it's not just what you think, like an older person in a wheelchair. When it comes to ADA and accessibility, it's about minimizing issues with accessing these places for those who have a myriad of concerns and issues. Not everybody needs a ramp, is in a wheelchair, has a walker. There are some that are mobile, but the act of walking up and down stairs is extremely painful. Some people have limited visibility, so ensuring that you don't have things sticking out too far from the wall between 24 and 72 inches or 60 inches helps them not run into things and hurt themselves. Hearing impaired, having visual indicators on certain things, have that. Vision impaired, having physical indicators on certain walkways. That's what we're doing. We're trying to minimize the things that would cause harm, potential harm or stress to those who need additional help. And quite frankly, most of it's beneficial to even those who don't have mobility issues. It just makes it easier. Um, and so when it comes to that, the easiest question to ask is, can everyone enter, move, and participate? Can they come in? A lot of places I evaluate, they have wheelchairs sitting in a closet in case somebody needs it, or a walker. I challenge you, park in the marked accessible parking space and try to enter your building for activities without anybody helping you. Because that's kind of the other part of the ADA and accessibility. It's providing dignity to those who might have some mobility or other restrictions and allowing them to enter your space without having to rely on somebody else. And that's a big thing, and that's something as a community, a body of believers, that we can encourage is recognizing they're made in His image, all of them, and so what can we do to assist in having the ability for them to be able to enter with dignity? Um, and thoughtful designs and doing that communicates value and dignity again to every person. And an inclusive facility, that's welcoming. Um, that's that's what we're all hoping for, and that says again, all are welcome. And even if it's only one area, and you can only afford to do one accessible route, you make sure it's the signage is clear and say, absolutely, this is where we're going. Especially if you're having a retrofit. Um, and I don't believe, and again, this is Nathan speaking, I don't believe accessibility as being optional. It's either all are welcome or they're not. And so I think that's a visible expression of the gospel in your facility. That's a very tangible way of saying, um, yeah, if you've got elevators, label them, things like that. Now, to be clear and to be fair, retrofitting and upgrading to be compliant in all areas of your facility can be very costly, can be very difficult. And you may not be able to upgrade a women's restroom and a men's restroom on a floor to be accessible. That's where making the decision, and sometimes it's a hard decision of going, we can't do both, so we're going to make one larger and make it um, you know gender neutral, if you will, restroom, that it's an accessible restroom. Maybe you call it, and what I like to do is make a large restroom, call it the family restroom, because uh, sometimes you might serve a community that needs adult changing tables. And so you need space to do that and things like that. Yes, it's a little bit, you might lose a space, but what you gain, in my opinion, is far more. Um, and then being aware of and thinking how things are laid out, marked out, and accessible. Again, the door hold open on the bathroom. A lot of people don't realize that, but yeah, after the initial pull, it can't be more than 5 pounds. Why? If you've ever been in a wheelchair and opened a door that has a greater than 5 pound hold open force and tried to hold it open and wheel yourself through, it's very difficult. It's very difficult in a walker. So those are the reasons and things that we look for. Here's just a few examples. One of the first one here, I think you can see my pointer. This is great. Accessible parking here. Accessible parking is generally going to be is supposed to be at the closest accessible point or route into the building. And there's depending on your seating, that's going to determine how many van accessible and just regular accessible parking spots you need, things like that. Um, and while this is good and I like it, the issue becomes when they exit the vehicle, the ramp area access is to the left of this picture, and this is a drive-through. And so we have those with mobility issues that rate parking here, but to gain access to the point that there's a ramp, they either have to walk all the way around this tree through this drive area or in the actual drive-through to get to it. And so it's just learning to think of things that way. Uh, right here, we see these are better. Down here towards this end where that car is, these are almost zero step, but not quite. Um, this is the ramp, but again, if I'm parked in any other space besides this one or this one, I've got to come out into this main drive area to then get to the ramped area here. And we look at the ramped area here, there is no contrasting color, there is no contrasting texture on the grade change. You see that in most of your intersections out in the city and other public areas, access areas. That's again to help the visibly impaired and things like that. If they feel the texture change, they understand there's a grade change coming, or the visual indicator that says, oh, that's a different color. That's probably a different grade change. Um, yeah. And so again, there's lots of stuff here, and a lot of this stuff in these parking spaces, it's a retrofit design. They've added additional. Many times you see they'll add additional churches and things will add additional parking spaces for those that have accessibility needs. And kind of Buck pointed out here, the ADA rules have specific designs that you're supposed to adhere to, signage, space, aisle width, all sorts of things. When it's done kind of in-house, like this is, while it's a great start, finding the rules for parking lots and ADA, it's a simple Google search away, and it will show you the various types, signs needed, sizes, everything. And pretty much every commercial supply catalog has ADA compliant signage, and will tell you the right height to hang them at and things like that. And so we look at there again. This is another example. I'm focusing a lot on parking lots because, again, what's part of the big three is parking. So if you start to make improvements or have to spend some money in a parking lot, that's a great time to consider your accessible routes and how you have parking. Many times, if you were to remove, for example, the curb or drop the sidewalk down lower and accessible parking and make it wider so you've got the access aisle between each space, or double spaces, then you've eliminated a big potential accident point because they can exit the vehicle and go straight forward onto a sidewalk. And so there are things like that. But here again, they've just added a bunch of additional spaces, but to get to this very well marked crosswalk, they have to go into this main drive area to access there. Um, yeah, access there. And then this one, while that's a creative use of paper, one, that's not an adequate repair, but two, in a handicap or accessible marked restroom, this does not meet accessible things as far as protection and uh, all of the stuff you're supposed to have. And that's also a maintenance issue. So same thing here. While they have handrails, there are specific allowances and design types for if they may need to redesign this to get the proper handrail behind the toilet, and this toilet actually doesn't meet the minimum sizing and height for an ADA accessible toilet. So while the handrails are nice, it's a good gesture for someone who knows what it should be. This is not correct, and so that can be a concern for some people. Same thing. Again, we have here, not only is the cutout for the accessible stuff really close to this hot water heater, it's not protected like it's supposed to be either. Um, and then kind of the last one in here, this is a ramp. It's great that it has a ramp and you can't see it coming down here, but it goes up here and then it turns left. But you'll notice there's no railing or handrails, and that's a requirement. That's also a good safety practice to make sure your railings are up in there and um, go through that. So that's just a few examples of ADA. We have things like if you have automatic door openers, which is great. I love automatic door openers. From a life safety standpoint, it should be able to open the exterior door from the inside, even if it's locked. I don't know if you knew that, but now you do. And you can work with your controls company to make that happen because it's a life safety issue. Can I, if I have mobility issues, exit the building safely even when it's locked down? Most doors will have a push bar. That's why we can exit even when they're locked. Well, if I'm required to use the push button, the exit bar or the latch needs to be able to retract. And so to wrap it up, just a few things to consider as you're thinking about this. We've talked an hour for a process that I teach 8 hour day, 8 hours on. So we just kind of really consolidated stuff, and I recognize that. But some of the information you need at a minimum to be able to plan appropriately and to do things. Square foot of maintained, and that's the heating and cooled space of your facility. Model and serial number of all the HVAC equipment. Age, type, number of squares of all the roofing. Square foot of your parking and what type it is. How old all of the different sections of your facility are if it's multiple construction. Where all the utility cutoffs are, and the mechanical, electrical, and all the equipment locations. That should be in some type of floor plan somewhere that you can access and that other people that come behind you can as well. And you should be tracking your planned and preventative maintenance, your warranty expirations, and inspection and compliance intervals. Um, a lot of times, again, if you don't know what you need to know, you're not necessarily tracking what you should, right? And then walk and inspect the perimeter of the property, intermediate distance between the perimeter and the building facade, and then right around the facility next to the facade. That's part of what um, what I do for facility condition assessments. I'm walking everything and taking a look at stuff. That's the best way to understand your facility. Um, and then you need to test and walk all of the different accessible routes. If you've got marked accessible routes from the parking lot to the facility, you're checking the door openers, handrails, elevators, lifts, ramps, restrooms. If they're marked as accessible, are they really marked as accessible? Do the ramps meet the 1 in 12 requirement? Are they, because a ramp installed incorrectly is just as bad as not having a ramp, or if it's the wrong slope. And same thing with your minimum openings. If the door is too small, you may mark it as accessible, but it's not. And so those are just some basic. You'll have access to these slides. But again, this is kind of the fire hose 100,000 foot view of this topic. And so that's what I have. Thank you so much. I know we went a little over, and I apologize for that. But if anybody wants to stay on and ask some questions, I'm happy to be there. And there was a great question: how do you keep the doors from those little preschoolers escaping? Very difficult. But you can typically add if it's not part of an accessible route, you can add an upper lock. That you can slap, and it's just a little push bar, and you put it higher than the preschoolers can reach, so that you one motion hit it and open it. They make things like that. If it's part of the accessible route, it becomes a little more difficult. But sometimes you use the request to exit button that's installed correctly, and then use a mag lock or a secondary lock or something to that effect. And so, yeah, my email is there on those slides. And I know this was a lot, but please reach out, take advantage of our free resources. And however we can help you, we're glad to. Thank you all again for your time.